Hello and welcome to another session of AVR120. Today we're going to be going over how to set up a trigger to play an animation and open a door, as well as apply some force to an object. So to start things off here, we'll go ahead and we'll need to download some assets from the Unity store here, asset store. So we'll want to download this sci-fi styled modular pack. Okay, you can find it at this URL. So pause the video if you need to take a look at it. Otherwise, if you search for sci-fi styled modular pack in the Unity Asset Store, you should be able to download it. You'll just need to add it to your assets. If you don't have this doesn't appear for you, you need to go ahead and sign in with your Unity ID, and then you can go ahead and click Add to My Assets, and then you'll be able to import it into your scene here. So I'll go ahead and click Add to My Assets. I'll need to sign in, and I'll go ahead and open this up in Unity. So we'll see here that I've already downloaded it, but I'll go ahead and re-download it here. And I want to import this into my scene. So I'll go ahead and click import. And we can import most of this. Let's see. We'll just import most of it, or we'll import the entire thing, I should say. Let's go ahead and click import. You can click the Fix Now button here if this pops up for you for normal map settings. And when that completes there, you can close out this package manager. And under Assets, you should be able to see that you have a sci-fi style modular pack now. So go ahead and open that up. And we'll have some prefabs in here. Go ahead and click into the prefabs folder. We have all of these really interesting pieces of a base here. So we'll go ahead, and the first thing I'm going to want to go ahead and do is I'm just going to create a simple hallway. So I'll go ahead and grab this here, and I will drag it into the scene. And we can go ahead and hit this Y perspective to have a top view. I'm going to rotate my camera a little bit so I can kind of have a top good angle here. And then I will go ahead and take this corridor, and I'll go ahead and duplicate it a few times. Kind of build this object here, or build this base, I should say. So something along those lines there should look pretty good. And we'll go ahead and then we will add a door. I'll drag the door in. I'm going to drag this glass panel that's in the prefabs and door folder. And I'm choosing the glass panel here. And I'm just going to set it to positive 90 degrees. And I will move it in front of my hallway here. And I want to go ahead and I'm going to scale the doorway. So I'm going to press R, and then I'm going to grab the X and scale it out a little bit, like so. So I want to go ahead and parent this to an empty game object, all of these this base structure that I've set up here. So I'll go ahead and um, outside, kind of in the empty space in the hierarchy, I'll right click and I'll create an empty. And you'll see that the position is kind of in a wonky spot, so I'm just going to set it to 0, 0, 0. And I'll just call this secret base. You just click it and press F2. You can call it secret base. If you not double click it, excuse me. If you click it once and let go, it'll allow you to rename it. Otherwise, you can just press F2. And now I want to go ahead and I'm going to actually move all these together um, kind of close to where that 0, 0, 0 is. That looks about right. So I'll just go ahead and select everything now and drag it under my secret base so that I can move it all as one object. And I'm going to take my secret base and I'm going to put it in the environment. So now that we've created the base, we're going to go ahead and create an animation on the door and have that be tied to a script that's on a trigger in our environment. So to begin, we're going to need to go ahead and animate the door. And in order to do that, we need to add an animator component on the door. So the main door, the glass panel one with door, already has an animator on it. But we don't want to use that. We want to create our own. So what we're going to go ahead and do here is we're going to remove this component, okay? And we're going to go ahead and um, add, okay, a animator component to this door here. So we'll click animator. All right. And now we have an animator component on the door itself. Okay. And we need to essentially give it an animator, and then we'll need to create clips on that animator for the animations to play on the door. So the animator is the component on the game object that allows us to set an object to have animations. The controller is what actually controls the animation states of the object, and then there are animation clips as well that will actually play different types of animations. So, like for example, the door closing and the door opening. Okay. There is You can also make transitions from one animation to another, but we're not going to do that in this tutorial. We're going to go ahead and call the animations directly from the script itself. But if you want to learn more about that, you can go to the Unity manual, and there is an entire section on animation. And we did do some of this animation blend tree setup in the 2D. So go ahead and review that if you'd like as well. We're not going to use a blend tree in this tutorial. We're just going to play an animation directly from script. Okay, so now that we've added the animator to specifically the glass panel door, not the entire object, but the object, the child object that's parented to it, the actual door itself, all right? You can see it's outlined in orange here. We'll want to go ahead and with that selected, if we press Control 6, it will open the animation window, okay? You can also go to Window at the top and select Animation from the Animation menu option, okay? So we can use this to create some animations in Unity. So if we drag this down to the bottom, all right, we'll see one of the options is we'll see that nothing kind of pops up here is we're able to select it, but it does have this create button right in the middle, and this will allow us to create our first animation clip. So we'll go ahead and click create. From this window, we're going to want to create an animation folder to put our animation clips in. So if we right click, go to new folder, and we create an animations folder, If we click into this, I'm going to call this animation door open RG1. So just make sure when you're naming your clips that your naming convention is standard across all your clips and that it's something easy for you to remember. Door open is already kind of taken. The animation, what we imported actually has some animations on it already. So I would suggest while you're making these new ones to call it something different, maybe put your initials next to it. So I'll go ahead and save this now. And you'll see here we're presented with this kind of timeline um, option here. So what we can go ahead and do is add a property, and we're going to want to modify the object's transform to create the animation. So we'll add a position, and you'll see that it creates two keyframes. These are keyframes, and they're at the beginning of the clip and the end of the clip. So what we can go ahead and do now is we can actually go all the way to the end of the clip here, and we can click this enable disable keyframe recording mode. So this will allow us to record an animation via how we are moving it in the scene. And so it'll also animate all the frames in between where the end position of the door is. So what I mean by that is if I click this record and I grab this blue Z vector to move it to the open position here, all right? If I click record again, the first set of keyframes is the door being closed, and this last one that I created is this position, the door being open. And so it's going to animate all of the frames in between. So if we click this play, you can see the animation occurring. Okay, so now what we'll want to go ahead and do is we're going to create a second animation, and this is will be a door closed animation. So in order to do that, we can do it right from this animation tab here. We'll click the drop down here and click create new clip. And I'm going to head and call this door close RG1 in case I need to make any more. All right, and I'll save it. And we can go ahead and do the same thing. So we'll add property, we'll go to transform, and we'll add the position property there. And you can see that it, once again, creates these two keyframes for us at the beginning and the end. So because this is the door closed, I actually want the door to start in the open position because it's going to animate to a closed position. So I will go ahead and actually hit the record on the, I'll move my kind of marker to the first frame, hit record, and I'll actually take this to our open position here from the last animation. And I'll go to the end, and you'll see that it actually already animates closed, so I don't even need to set that up. So I can just hit this record button, and now if I play this, it closes. Okay. So we have these set up now, these two animation clips. So we can go ahead and start working on a script to basically call these animations here. But the first, actually, the first thing we'll need to do before we do that is we need to go into our animator. So make sure you have the door selected again. Click your glass panel door controller here. All right. And this is what the animation or the animator window looks like. So we have the two clips that we created on this animator, but we actually want it to default to a essentially an idle, which is just the door being closed and not really playing an animation. So I'm going to right click and I'll create an empty state. All right. So I'll right click create state and click empty. And that's just going to create an empty animation clip or animation state that will just be the door being closed. So I'll click the new state here. I'm just going to call this, I'm going to rename it to door idle. And I'm going to then right click it again, and I'm going to set it as the layer default state. I will then go ahead and double click into these clips here, double left click, and we want to turn off this loop time option or the animations will continue to loop. And we need to do that for both of them. We don't really need to do that for the door idle. It doesn't really have an animation or a motion. As you can see, there's no motion. But if we click into this, you can see that the motion is the animations that we created for door open and door close. Okay. So we will go ahead now and start working on that code there. So just to kind of reiterate, the animator controls the current animation state that the object's in. Okay, so this is the animator. It is on the glass panel door. This is the animator component right here. It controls the current animation state the object's in, and these lines represent transitions to those animation states. In our situation, we don't really need to worry about these transitions, but in order to, if you wanted to say, set up some parameters in code to transition to these animations and back, you could click this parameters option and then click this plus, and you would be able to create some parameters to go back and forth, or just variables like booleans or floats to transition to specific animations. It's a little bit outside the scope of what we're going to be going over, so just kind of understand the basic concept that you need an animator on an object to play animation clips, and that you're able to transition back and forth between them. Okay, so now we're going to go ahead and create some door triggers to play these animations here. So what we'll go ahead and do is I'm going to go to the actual secret base itself. And I want to put this on my secret base object and move it near my door. So I'll right click the secret base and I will create a 3D cube. We'll see it kind of is inside a little bit there. I'm going to move this outside, put it in front of the door, and I'm going to then press R and scale it on the Z a little bit here. And then I will rename it to outside door trigger. I'm going to duplicate it. I'll press W to select, and I will move this inside now. And I'm actually going to move this outside one just a little bit closer, right about there. And I'll move this inside one. Oops. A little bit closer here as well. And I'm going to rename it to inside door trigger. Okay, so we want to use the OnTriggerEnter method. And so if we look on these cubes and we look over at Box Collider, there's a isTrigger option. It says, if enabled, this collider is used for triggering events and is ignored by the physics engine. So physics will not be applied to these objects. And they're essentially going to be used as, we're going to use them as invisible triggers. So they won't interfere with our player. So what we're going to go ahead and do is we're going to hit the isTrigger option here, okay, for the outside and the inside as well. And I don't really want them visible, So I'm just gonna, you can turn off this component called the mesh renderer, which renders the visibility of the object. So I'll go ahead and do that for both of them. And now we'll see that they're invisible. So I'll select the outside door trigger in the hierarchy now, and I'm going to click add component, and I'm going to create a new script, and I'm going to call this trigger door controller, and I'll create an add. So I'll open up this trigger door controller, and we'll go ahead and begin writing some code here. So one of the first things I want to go ahead and do is I want to get a reference to my animator. So what we'll do is we'll use this field called serialize field. Okay, so this basically will allow us to keep the animator private, but will allow so it's only accessible via this script essentially, um, but it will be visible in the editor. So it says here, force Unity to serialize a private field. So basically, it just allows us to drag a reference in the main editor and keep the variable private and only accessible inside of this class. So we'll go ahead and create a private animator type variable, and we will call this my door, and we'll set it equal to null. And we'll go ahead and use serialized field again, and we'll create another private variable of type bool, and we'll call it open trigger. And we will use this to initially play the open door animation, and we will create another bool called close trigger, set that to false as well, and that will control um, when we play the closed door animation. I'm just going to comment as I go here. So I'm saying this is a reference to the doors animator, so we can control the door open close animation through code. And I'll say that these are bools to control whether the object is an open trigger or close trigger. They will trigger the open or close door animation. All right, so now that we've set that up here, we're going to use a built-in Unity method, and this will be called private void OnTriggerEnter. And so the way OnTriggerEnter works is now that we've marked this object that we're going to put this script on as a trigger, its collider essentially acts as a switch, and it will check essentially against a collider that collides with it. So OnTriggerEnter is called when the collider other enters the trigger. So other is going to be, in our case, our player collider, but it can really be any collider, and it will trigger whatever is within these curly braces here. So we'll go ahead and I'll comment this. I'll say this is a built-in Unity method, which essentially happens when we mark the object. We have this script on as a trigger when it detects another object's collider code inside the method occurs. So now what we'll want to go ahead and do is we're going to run a check, and we're going to say if the collider that is colliding with this object, and we're going to actually check its tag, and we're going to check that its tag is player. And if it is the player tag, we'll run some code. So to reiterate about tags and layers, so a layer is a way to group a like group of objects, and you can use it to run checks. And similarly, tags are what we can use to run checks on single objects, and so we can tag objects as specific um, strings, and then we can use that to check against and run some code. So in this case, we're saying we want to see if the other collider is player, then we will go ahead and do another check inside of this. And we'll say if the bool open trigger is true, we can run some code and log out a value that says, or a string that says door open triggered. So I'm just going to explain what this is now too. In a comment, we'll say we are checking if the tag of the collider that's colliding with this object's with this object is tagged as player. We can use tags to specify behavior of the object depending on its tag. So we can test this now really quick. If we go back into Unity and we'll save, and we need to drag a reference to the animator into the outside door controller. So if you click the little circle, there's only one animator in the scene, so we'll choose that one, glass panel door. If there's more than one, you just need to you need to select the door, and you can go ahead and an easy way to do this would be to like click the outside door trigger, lock it, click the door that you have the animation on. You can just drag that door object into the my door slot, and that will access its animator. And I want to go ahead and set this bool to, I'm going to click the outside door trigger again in the hierarchy. I'm going to set this open trigger bool to true, and I will save it, and I'll run. And we can see here that if we go to the console, so I'll press escape and go to console, it says door open triggered. Okay. Another issue is that the player is kind of bigger than the base, so what we're going to want to go ahead and do is scale the base up a little bit. So I'll click the base, and I'll press R and I'll just scale the entire thing up from the middle by grabbing the middle and then just like moving my mouse up. And I can make it as big or as small as I want. I think that's a pretty good size there. And maybe we'll make these buildings a little bit bigger too. I'm actually going to make this base just a little bit bigger. There we go. All right, so the trigger works here. So we're going to go back into our script. And now we can actually run some code. So we have a reference to our animator. And so we can actually just animate straight up, call that animation clip off the animator. All right, so we will go ahead and use the my door animator reference. Okay, and we will access a method called play that's on the animator, and it takes a string, and so we need to give it the exact string of the clip that we created. So you can find that by going into Unity and going into the animator and looking at the exact clip. But actually, I'll just go just to make it exact. I'll click the clip and then I can copy it from this field, the name field, and I will Control C and I'll go back to the editor and I'll just paste it in there like that. And I need a semicolon at the end. And so that will go ahead and allow us to play the open door animation. And so I want to go ahead and when I enter the trigger, I want the animation to play, but then I'm going to want to change open trigger to false. And that is because we want, when the animation plays, we can go ahead and set it to false so that the animation doesn't play again and the door will close. And so I also want to run a check on the close trigger. So I'll say else if, and I'll set this to close trigger. And I'll say if close trigger is true, I will go ahead and go to my door and I'll click play, and I'll select the play method. And I'm going to go back into Unity one more time and I'm going to just select the door close animation clip and highlight and copy the name field and put some parentheses in there and paste it inside those parentheses and put a semicolon. And then I will set, so I need to set open trigger to false and close trigger to true. Okay, so when you enter the trigger, the open trigger boolean will be set to false and the close trigger boolean will be set to true so that the door will close when you if you stand too long inside of it. And then we'll do the opposite here. So we'll set close trigger to false and open trigger to true. And this will allow the animation to keep playing correctly even if we're inside the base. So we'll go ahead and we will go back into Unity and check our scene view. I'm going to go to my outside door trigger, and this reference is set up correctly. And actually, I can go ahead and go to my project now, and you'll see that the animation clips and the animation controllers in the animations folder, which is what I want. But I'm going to click the top level assets, and our assets folder is getting a little messy. So what I'll go ahead and do is I will right click and go to create, and I'll create a folder, and I'll call this scripts. And I'm just going to put all of my scripts in here. Just move them. And that's okay. It shouldn't cause any issues. I'm going to click into the script folder again, and I'm going to find my trigger door script here, trigger door controller, and I will drag this onto my inside door trigger because that didn't have a script on it. And I'll need a reference to the door animator, so I will lock this, and I'll click my door, and I will drag this into the my door animator here slot, and I'll set this as close trigger. All right, so now if I go ahead and I'll play this on maximize, I will go ahead and play. And if I walk, it'll open, it'll stay open. And if I walk inside, it will close. And if I walk again into it, it will open, and it will close if I walk into the outside trigger. And then if we, I'll put this on focused again here, and I'll play it. And if we look at the values here, okay, so for example, outside, we'll go ahead, and if you look at the you'll see that it oh, sorry, I have the inside door controller locked. So if I select the outside, you'll see that open trigger is set to true. So I'll click play, and still true. And if I go in, it actually sets it to false. But the animation will keep the door open. But if I leave now, it'll stay open. But if I walk back into it, it'll close, but it's back to open again. And then you can see here that when I walk in, it closes it. It's open, so it just changes the values here of the booleans to play the animations correctly. Okay, so there you go. This is working correctly now. So we'll go ahead and call it there for this session. If you have any questions, feel free to let me know. Otherwise, have a great rest of your day.